If ever your life could be a true crime podcast episode, then this podcast is for you. We're about to embark on a roller coaster of emotions, insights, survival, and stories about escape. So buckle up and let the journey begin.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Escape Pod, a part serious, part hilarious dramedy featuring stories of escape. I'm Julie.
And I'm Charity. Are we going to actually be funny today?
I mean, I think our guests can be funny sometimes.
If we could do a YouTube thing of your dance down the hallway this morning.
It was pretty good, wasn't it?
That was pretty good. In heels, I was impressed.
Your heels, by the way. How many people have their bosses gift them a pair of shoes? Me.
Yeah.
Because they actually fit.
Merry Christmas.
I know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And they're comfortable.
Good. Yeah, they're nice shoes. I was bummed. I'm like, their sizes were just messed up.
Yeah.
So. But I'm happy you can use them.
Big feet. You do not. And I'm always bummed when people are like, I have this size 8. Could you wear it? I'm like, when I was like 11.
6th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Same.
We have a special guest today. I love it when we have guests.
Yeah, I think that's our jam, actually.
Not that I don't love just being stuck in a room with you for an hour.
She says after reviews have been done.
So our special guest, you know him as the person who I question why he doesn't like me on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah. He doesn't even realize that he's a kind of a regular.
We've talked about you before.
He's a regular. He comes up a lot.
Do I not like you?
I'm like, I feel like he makes fun of me a lot.
I think it's because he likes you, though.
Oh, okay.
Like compared to other people? I don't make fun of you.
Well, not compared to other people, but relative
you know
to
who
her, because she doesn't see you
of.
really interact with other people, and he's just like that with everybody. You should see how he is with our kids.
Maybe there's like a collective attitude toward me from your former fraternity, because my brother-in-law, I think, was one of your fraternity brothers back in the day.
Tim was a Delta Sigma Phi. Mike's a triangle.
No, my brother-in-law.
Oh, Jason.
Yeah. And when I call their house, he says, just Julie calling, just Julie. And I feel a little bit that attitude from our special guest. So our special guest.
I did theorize one time that it was because of the Julie that
was already in your life.
Led us to each other, that maybe you subconsciously kind of take things out on her because of all the hell we put you through. She put you through.
Not because she introduced us.
Not because she
and all the hell you put me through.
Oh, here we go.
Thanks a lot.
I mean, okay. So if you haven't figured it out already, our special guest
is my boyfriend.
Tim, Charity's longtime boyfriend. I think they're committed now. How long have you guys been married? When you have to think about it, it's been a while.
29 years.
Yeah, coming up on 30.
No way. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
29 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
How many people don't make it like 29 months?
I know.
That's incredible. Well, it's stuck. So we're excited to have you here, Tim. Tim is a local law enforcement officer who has seen many a thing. In later episodes, we'll maybe get into some of the funnier side of things. But we're actually going to start today with, we talk a lot about trauma and crisis brain on this podcast, and also ways to escape from, trauma, traumatic cycles, familial cycles that are terrible, all sorts of things.
But also ways to cope with terrible things that happen in life that you can move through,
right,
and not have them completely
determine everything, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. So, Charity, I think I'll let you start, because you two have told this story many, many times. So, I'm not going to get in your way. So, go ahead. Take us back to August of 2011.
August of 2011. Actually, just to get into our rhythm, usually he will start. So I've started doing this training with him when he trains new recruits, and we've done this in other, like for Spearfish and Sioux Falls. And he kind of has his way. And you just know how, like, if I make you start the tour of One Heart from a different point and it throws off everything, I think it'll throw me off if he doesn't start. So I'll actually Just pretend like we're new recruits, even though we probably don't look like cops in training.
I mean, you don't want me to carry a weapon. I'm just saying.
You're much better looking than our recruits are.
Not safe.
Aww.
Well, we should probably start with the career change.
That was traumatizing.
Well,
He laughs.
Just the pay, drop in pay was the traumatizing part.
I feel that in my soul. Yeah, I do. So you escaped from engineering.
I did. So yeah, my education is in engineering, and so we, moved from Rapid, where I graduated from, back to Minnesota, where I'm originally from, and Charity came with, and we did that life in the city for about 12 years, and kind of decided at some point that we didn't want to live in the city anymore. We were kind of tired of the weather in Minnesota. We were tired of the mosquitoes and everything else. So and I knew that engineering is not an easy place to find a job everywhere you go. So,
Well, not his
Field of engineering, yeah.
So we kind of picked where we wanted to be instead of seeing where a new job would take us. So we picked Rapid City, and
We've always done things in a non-traditional route, which I think is my influence in the relationship because he was brought up very traditionally and I was brought up, well, we've already discussed that. So,
well, but I don't know. I mean, you swore at one point you would never move back to Rapid City.
I know.
And so how I ever
But you wore me down.
I did. So
You
I don't
did.
know. I don't know how that happened. I won that battle.
I feel like a lot of people listening will be like, what's the difference between Minnesota and South Dakota, especially weather-wise? But we're in the Black Hills, the beautiful Black Hills, and it has a tendency to be a little bit of a banana belt compared to the rest of, especially eastern side of the state, that is very much like Minnesota. But
Well, it's like 50
we can
degrees
have-
outside right now.
Yeah,
and
we
it's
can have a
December
60-degree day in
21st.
mid-December. We can have a 70-degree day in mid-January. Now, those don't stick around, but it is a relatively nice place to live, I think. This is home for me, for sure.
Well,
But we're already full. We're already full.
so
we don't need anyone else moving in.
but because some of the previous stories that she's probably shared, she was like, I'm never living back in Rapid City.
Correct.
Our kids are never going to go to Rapid and go to the schools there. But we ended up deciding to come back to Rapid, so I knew I was going to have to pick a new career, and I was kind of okay with that. Like engineering, great career, but it wasn't my passion, and I looked at the people I was working with who had been doing it 12, 15, 20 years longer than me. They didn't exactly look like they were
Skipping through the hallways like
enjoying-
Julie was doing
right.
today.
Not having fun.
So I was okay with making that change. So I don't even know how the idea came into my mind to become a cop. But once it was in there, I thought about it, and I did my research, and eventually I went to Charity and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking.
Well, I said, because he kept pressing the move. And I said, okay, fine. What are you going to do? And then he said, I think I want to be a cop. And I'm like, shit. Because I know him. And by the time he says something, it's already well thought through.
So
And I'm
even as when you
"Ah,
were a little
crap."
kid, did
No.
you want, you really don't know what prompted this?
No,
Well, then I said, why? And he said,
I don't know, what did I say?
he said, because you want to work with kids. And I thought that was the weirdest thing. I was terrorized by cops as a kid. And so it didn't, I thought that was weird, a weird connection to make in law enforcement, but that's what you ended up doing. And
I did my research on the Rapid City PD, and I knew they had the school program and the school liaison program. And I had actually, the only other place I applied out here was the Star Academy. And
Okay.
I actually got a job offer for the Star Academy while I was still in the hiring process for the PD. And we took a gamble, and they moved out here before, and I quit my job before I actually had my offer with the police department. So I had to turn down Star Academy, which closed not long after, so that was a smart move. And then I had to turn that down, hoping that the offer would go through with the PD. That's the only other job I put in for. Ended up getting it. So, yeah, I
Got
was
here.
starting over. Went from a very good engineering salary to $17.56 an hour with a family of 4, and
I cried.
yeah, we found out what the federal poverty line really means.
Yeah.
Oh, well, me too. But I started at $7.50 an hour with a 4-year degree. I also cried in the driveway of my parents' home after I got the job offer. I went home and
Like
I
my dream
cried.
job. And this
I was
is
like,
what
it
I
actually got lower because I had one offer before that, before I graduated from college to go into journalism, TV news. And I turned it down because I was like, there were some things about the position I wasn't like gung-ho about. But the pay was also like, I feel like there might be places that would be a little bit better. And there weren't. Like, it actually got worse. But I will say this, the place I did end up going to, I did actually like working there. So it's fine. And I got promoted. I did earn a little more than that, but I never earned a lot of money in TV. Yeah. So I getcha. And I did not have a family. So that made a difference.
So yeah, now we're starting over, and so the way it works is you start out on the street. You can't just skip to a high up position or whatever, a detective or whatever. You have to 3 years is typically what you're going to put in on the street before you can start putting in for other things. So that's where I'm starting. I'm on the street, and then at 3 years, a spot came open for the school program. I put in for it. I'd been working since day one that I was going to be in the school, so everyone knew what I wanted to do. So I set myself up, did my first year at Southwest Middle School, which was a blast, and then we did a switch. So the PD took North Middle School, and we gave the county, the sheriff's office, Southwest. So I was in a transition period. So the summer in between school years. School's not in session, obviously, so you either go back to patrol or you go up to CID and you do temporary detective work. So that summer I was sent up to do temporary detective work, which isn't where I wanted to be at the time. I wanted to be out on the street doing that thing. Took her a little bit of time to get used to me coming home in the uniform.
Anytime, like he'd come home on duty for a meal or something, and I'd see that car pull into our driveway, and I'd be, or I'd turn around, he's in uniform, and I would just jump. I have a really crazy startle reflex anyway, that response, and he'd come. It took me probably a year. Now I like it. But it took a while.
Yeah, so initially all these ideas I had of, showing up in uniform and the role play and her being all turned on by the uniform, that didn't exactly work out in my favor.
Oh, my gosh.
Fail.
I can't.
But backing up to something he said about being in the school and the schools switching, the county and the city switching schools, the kids loved this guy. They petitioned Chief Steve Allender to walk it back. They petitioned. They sent letters and cards and a petition, and it was this whole thing. And they were determined that they were going to get to keep him. And that plays into the story later.
So, so summertime, I'm up in CID doing temporary detective work. And, so back then, kind of the way it worked was you just got all the shit cases that no one else wanted. Like, it's different now. You go up to CID as a temporary detective now, like you're full blown in there. You're working cases, so it's changed a lot. But I think there was 4 of us up there this summer. We're all in this little like cubicle row in this small hallway, and it was not where I wanted to be.
Sure.
So towards the end of the summer, there's about maybe a month left. The street crimes unit, which is something I had done previously. They had lost, it's like a 6-person unit. They had lost a couple. So they asked me, hey, for the last, 4 weeks of the summer, do you want to go back out and help them? And I was like, hell yes.
Already out the door.
So my first day back on the street in about a year was the day of the shooting.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes. So I'm excited to go back. Ooh. And I think I was working
go big or go home.
I think I was working like 10 o'clock I started about 10.
Yeah,
it was kind of a swing shift type deal. So I go to work, and I'm having a blast. I'm doing my thing. There was 3 of us on that day. Mm-hmm. And this group deals with issues in the drinking in public, issues in the park, like mostly lower level type nuisance stuff, downtown area and bike path. And so I know I called you a couple of times.
Several times. Going back to jail. Like you were just, doing the thing and having so much fun. Way different than coming home from the cubicle.
And her morning was a little different.
Oh, you want to talk about my morning? My morning was quite different. So this is summer. Now we're like poor again, right? And this day was, our son's name is Alec, our youngest, and it was Mommy Alec date day. And Alec had come to us and said he wanted to join the orchestra. So he was 9 3/4 years old. Mm-hmm. He was getting ready to go into 4th grade. And I said, well, what do you want to play? And he said, well, I'll play the violin because we have one. Just one that had been handed down from your great-grandfather or something.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful instrument. And I just looked at him and I said, what do you really want to play? And he said, the cello. And I knew this, when he was a little toddler, I knew the kid was a cello, and I never said anything because I didn't want to be that parent that is I'm going to shape you, and who knows, it could have been a dream. I hallucinated something and then I shaped.
Well, am I not supposed to do that as a parent?
No.
Oh, I'm trying to get my kid to be a doctor so somebody can take care of me when I get old.
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, right?
That one's more strategic. I'm not going to fault you on that one. So anyway, I just looked at him, and he knew money was hard, right? Money was tight, and I just said, you know what? We're going to figure it out. So we went to a local music rental store that day. And but before that morning, so it was 9:30 in the morning, getting ready for the day, and I had this intuitive hit, if you will, or a knowing, and it's not like a vision. It's not like I saw something. It's just oh, shit. And it was about him getting shot. Now, the thing that's odd about that is that it had happened about 5 years before that, 4 or 5 years before that. So when he was, before the move back to Rapid City, we had done an anniversary trip in St. James, or the St. James Hotel in Red Wing, Minnesota. And I didn't tell him about it for a long time, because it messed with me. So we're at this beautiful historic bed and breakfast, and this message, this thing happens, and I was very taken aback by it, to the point that I called my best friend, who's a hypnotherapist, and said, this is messing with me. I don't like what you think about, you bring about. I don't want to be thinking that my husband's going to die very early in our marriage, and I cannot not see this, and I don't want to look at, every time I look at him, this is what I see. So she did some work with me and kind of took me through hypnosis, and it disassociated that instance with every time I looked at him, right? So that was good, but then it came back. So this morning, that same thing from 5 years prior came back. Now, when it happened 5 years prior, I had no idea this guy was going to end up being a cop, so nothing made sense. Mm-hmm. Also have a very vivid imagination, so I always chalk things up. And and staff knows, when I have an intuitive hit, it's usually we need to go check into something. Mm-hmm. Like when we had squatters in one of our buildings, or just things that there's no evidence. It's just I have a feeling.
Engineers don't get into a lot of gunfights.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah,
I mean, fair.
So, so I kind of thought about it. Now, the other thing that was going on in my life was I had just hit 4 weeks in public office. And that's something I never felt compelled to do. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be in elected office, or,
You just hit enough potholes on the street by your house that you're
there were
probably something needs to be done.
There were some things going on in the city, and, with my background, civil engineering, and I was just like, why on earth is it designed this way? This is it doesn't make sense. So I called my then alderman, and he's like, well, I don't know. Let me get back to you. So he goes and he finds a store, and he's like, well, so-and-so this, and because they own this business, wanted this parking, and so they couldn't build the road this way. And I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? This is dangerous.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, I can fix things. I'm a fixer. Planner, doer, fixer. So I just thought I could just quietly serve and just help steward and fix things in the background. Well, it did not work out that way. So 4 weeks old on the council. So I just think I'm tired. I'm stressed. I didn't like the attention that, well, you know me in cameras. Opposite of you. And then, now I'm up there and there's freaking news media and all this stuff everywhere all the time. And I could not get used to it. I didn't like it. So again, I chalk it up to vivid imagination. I'm tired. I'm stressed. I'm, still adjusting. So I don't think much of it. Mm-hmm. Beyond, it was weird that 5 years or however many years later, this thing resurfaces. So go on our date day, find a cello to rent, go to our favorite restaurant, which happened to be in the same building, and just having a lovely time with my little boy. And then about lunchtime, it happens again. And I'm like, son of a bitch. And I'm like, literally, this face I'm making. I'm like, all right, okay, got it. And so now I'm starting to kind of prep myself. Like, something is happening today. There's no way it's not. And I'm not going to say anything to him because I don't want to get in his head. Now he's on duty. He's having the best time of his life and be like, don't get shot today. Like, something's going to happen. Because then what if that causes it to happen, right? So I'm doing all these narratives in my head like, oh, my God, I don't know. Can I even make a right move on this? If I say anything, does it cause it or whatever? Well, it didn't matter. I didn't say anything and it still happened. But, so I will leave it at that. And then you can start on your piece.
So I think it was about probably about 3:30 in the afternoon. We got a pretty benign call up in the Thompson Park area of North Rapid about some people causing issues in the park, consuming alcohol. It's kind of the normal thing that we dealt with. So by the time we got up there, the group was already leaving that area and kind of walking off to the north. So we kind of consulted the group, the three of us, and like, are we going to let them go? Are we going to go proactively stop them and see what they're up to? We're kind of a proactive unit, so we decided to go make the stop. So I was in a marked unit. We had another guy in a unmarked, and then one on a bike. So I was the easiest one to get there. So I pulled ahead of them, and they were walking down west on Anamosa. So I pulled down Greenbrier and kind of got in front of them and waited for them to get to me. There was 4 of them. Stopped them, made the initial contact. Nick Armstrong was on a bike. He biked up not long after I made the stop. So we call out on the radio. We're out with 4 people. Ryan McCandless was just working patrol, was in the area. So he pulled up and was just kind of standing back. So there was 3 of us there. So we ID'd them, or we're working on IDing them, and 3 of them were people that we were very familiar with. All of them very violent. The 4th one, none of us were familiar with. So the name that he gave us was not coming back. He gave us, so we were pretty sure he was giving us a false name because most of the people we run into, they're already in our system, especially if they're 21, 22 years old. We've had contact, so when we run their name, they're going to come back with something. And dispatch said, no, that we're not coming back with anything. We do have someone by that name with a different date of birth. So the other 3, we had no reason to keep them, so we let them go. So I was the one talking to the 4th subject, which was Daniel. Nick was kind of watching, just standing back watching, and then Ryan was standing back watching over both of us. So at that point, there's 3 of us to 1, and normally we're used to kind of being outnumbered the other way. So, I mean, as far as that goes, it was a better situation than we're normally used to. So at some point, I'm not facing either one of them. I was kind of turned, so they were like off to my left, and I heard the first shot go off. So I didn't see it. I didn't see a gun come out. I just heard it. So he took a gun from somewhere, probably waistband because he wasn't carrying a backpack or anything, and fired at Nick. And then, like, it was boom, boom. The next shot was at me. So I was about, 7 to 10 feet away from him. So I heard the first shot, and, we do a lot of training, firearms and everything else. So at that point in my career, I've done a lot of this. So I didn't have to really think. I just kind of, I turned, I went to draw my gun. I got hit before I could draw the gun, and I got hit the left side of my face, the upper jaw, kind of by my ear. Got hit, went down to a knee, came up and fired one shot, went back to kind of leaning down on one knee and then on my gun, blacked out for a second, and by the time I stood up, everything was over already. So he fired once at Nick, once at me, and then after I shot, he fired, I think, 3 more times at Ryan, and Ryan kind of circled around and shot 13 or 14 at him. So by the time I stood up, everyone is down. Daniel was the only one moving. He was crawling towards the back of one of the vehicles. I did manage to get on the radio after being shot, so you can't really understand what I'm saying, but you kind of get the idea by how I was trying to vocalize. And this is, around 4 o'clock on Anamosa, so busy street, a lot of people are driving by. So at that point, dispatch is getting calls from people, so they've put out over the radio that we've had an officer shot, I think is what initially went out, and so now the whole city is coming.
And so with Daniel, though, he wasn't like agitated or acting like he's going to do anything. Like, you had no reason to think he was a danger or a threat.
No, he was completely calm. He was not acting like someone who's going to pull out a gun and start shooting. How he was acting was exactly how somebody normally acts when they're probably lying to us. I mean, it's a crime to give a cop a false name, but he'd been through the system a lot already, so that's not a big thing. That's not a big crime to lie about who you are. And the reason most likely that he did that is he was back and forth between Rapid City and Pine Ridge, so a lot of us weren't really familiar with him. He did have a criminal history with us, but not too long before the shooting, he had a robbery and a burglary that he had committed, and we knew that, and those were investigated. So those warrants were going to be coming out for his arrest. So he kind of knows that, and he knows that if
he gets arrested, it's more serious.
Right,
he's in trouble.
Those warrants weren't out yet. So had he given us his regular name, he would have come back with
nothing. You wouldn't have even seen anything.
And he would have walked away. But he doesn't know he doesn't have the warrants yet. So he's just assumed that basically the next time he comes in contact with law enforcement, he's not going back to prison. He's going to try to shoot his way out of it. So, I stand back up and by that time there's citizens coming in, asking if they can help, and Sue Fox was the first. Jim Hansen, my first training officer, was the first one on scene, and Sue Fox was the first sergeant on scene. So I can't really talk, so I'm trying to relay that Daniel was the threat. They heard me run 4 names, so I needed them to know that the other 3 they were not involved in this at all, even though they're, like I said, they're very violent people, but they had no idea that this was going to happen.
So think about context, though. So he's trying to communicate. His jaw's been like pulverized. So the bullet hits the temple, deflects off the jaw, goes inside like the back of his throat, lacerates the back of the tongue. So burst salivary glands. So he's like a lot of fluid, a lot of blood. Goes down into his throat, inside the clavicle, all the way to the opposite side of the body, inside the rib cage. So that's their trajectory. He has and the bullet's breaking up on that trajectory, so it's not one piece. It's a bunch of pieces, 2 bigger pieces, and then a bunch of confetti of bone and bullet all the way through him. And he's trying to still do his job.
Well, adrenaline, man.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. What hurt at that point?
So it's not so much the pain, but like I said, it was close. So the muzzle blast basically went straight into my ear. So I didn't hear, after I got shot, I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear any of the other gunfire.
Really?
And so it's not really a pain, but the side of my face felt like it was probably sticking out about a foot, and I have this terrible ringing in my ear because of the muzzle blast going right into my ear. So
Like pressure?
I mean, kind of. Like I said, it's not so much pain. Like getting tased hurt way more than getting shot.
And just to clarify, he decided to undergo being tased as part of his training, not because he was in pursuit of law enforcement.
Well,
that would have been me.
They make everybody typically do that now, don't they?
You don't have to.
Oh, you don't have to anymore.
No, so our taser instructors, they give you a good spiel about you really need to do this. I know how important it is that you've gone through this if you're going to use this on other people. Really, I think they just want to tase as many of us as possible.
So you don't have to.
And it is
horrible.
It is horrible, but it's only 5 seconds.
Sure.
So it's not like in the movies when they tase somebody and it knocks them out for an hour.
Knock out.
It's not how it works.
Yeah.
But so it hurts.
Spoiler.
It hurts really bad for 5 seconds, and then it's over. Then it's done. Getting shot obviously has longer lasting.
Okay, so the taser thing is completely false in movies, but when someone, that muzzle blast, you do hear where they kind of like that high pitch and they tune everything out and you don't know what's going on. Like that's kind of what I envision. So is that more accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, pressure maybe is the right word, but just like I said, my face, the side of my face, just
huge.
Thought it was like. But you're right. There's adrenaline, so you're not really thinking about that. So now, medical is coming in and I'm still up walking around and, they're trying to get me to sit still. And so they get me to kind of sit on the ground and then they're like, I guess they're like, we just need to get him to the hospital. Like they can't do anything for me here. I don't think I was bleeding that much.
Interesting.
I mean, compared to what I've seen on other scenes,
Sure.
it wasn't a lot of blood. I mean, it's not like there's blood.
Is it because there wasn't an exit wound?
Maybe. I mean, there's just where I got hit. There's just not a lot of blood vessels up there.
Oh, that's true.
And probably maybe I caught it. I don't know. I'm not the medical expert, but so they're like, all right, let's just get him to the hospital. So they're trying to help me up. I'm like, nope, and I jump up on my own.
This is now Culberson, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so he wasn't chief yet. Scared the crap out of him. I heard this story 1,000 times because they're used to helping, right? First responders, so paramedics.
Allegedly.
Well, Julie's also married to one. But yeah, so they have their job. They're trying to take control of the situation and, help people. And he's like not going to have it. So he just stands up and puts himself on the stretcher. And yeah, I thought.
But before that, and there's one part I missed. So I take out my phone, which at that time was a flip phone, my department issue flip phone, and I hit the speed dial for her number, and then handed the phone to Sue because I couldn't talk, I started teaching a class on critical incidents with the police department with Rich Holt, and I didn't really understand until I started teaching this class with him, like, why did I do that? Why did I take out my phone in the middle of this chaos and hit her number? Mm-hmm. A critical incident, you lose control of everything. Like cops, we like to be in control of things, and this was a complete loss of control. So I couldn't do a lot. One thing I could do was take out the phone, hit the number, and hand it over. That was unconsciously, I think, my first step I could take towards gaining some control back. Jumping up on the gurney by myself was another one.
Yeah.
So you can talk about the phone call.
So yeah, the phone rings. So now here's the other weird thing that happened that day. I'm telling you, someone was looking out for us, right? So first of all, I've had the 2 forewarnings, the 4 shadowings. And then another weird thing happened. My son's first grade teacher called that day. Kim Kazi is her name. We used to help in her classroom when Alec was in first grade. Called out of the blue. And she said, hey, I'm going to be in the neighborhood for a hair appointment. And first I'm thinking, there are no hair salons in my neighborhood. Like, that's weird. So that was already weird. So can I stop by after? And I'm like, sure. So she comes in. I haven't seen her in ages, years probably. And she gets there 4:15 or so. Mm-hmm. I've got dinner kind of on the stove. He says he's probably going to be home, try to be home around 5 just to eat real quick. And we have our dog at the time. And so Kim and I took Gracie outside to do her thing. And I come in, I see that I've missed a call. I don't think much of it. And I'm back in the kitchen. Kim's there. Alec is downstairs on the cello for the first time. And it was actually lovely, not horrific like I thought it would be. By the way, he's ready
amazing.
to graduate as a classical musician, so it was the right move. But the phone rings again, and it's Tim's ringtone. And so I walk out of the kitchen to where my phone was over by the front door, pick it up, and that's when everything just kind of clicked into place. So I knew when I picked up that phone that it was not going to be him, because the way I was interpreting what happened was that he was going to die. So I pick up the phone and I answer it, and there was a pause, and I'm like, yep, this is it. Okay, I'm going to get the message now, right? And was she a sergeant at the time? Sergeant Fox. Lovely lady. And she just says, Charity, this is Sue Fox. Need you to meet me at the emergency department. Tim's been hurt. And I just said, oh my God, he's been shot. And she wouldn't answer. She just said, I need you to meet me at the emergency department. And I said, okay. Hung up the phone. And in my brain, I'm just like, okay, I got this. Alec, he's always been very intuitive too. So he comes walking up the stairs and he's looking at me. And Kim is standing in my kitchen, and I look at her, and then I look down at my hands, and they're doing this. And I just said, can you drive? She's like, that's why I'm here. Like, okay. Alec, get your shoes. Going to the hospital. What happened? I don't know. So that's the call.
So then it's a short ride to the hospital for me, and I mean I remember the ride, and then
How is the ride in the back of an ambulance? Less than stellar, I'm told.
I mean
Rough.
no, it wasn't. No, it was fine. No, it was fine. They took.
She just wants some dirt.
No, Jeremy always talks about going over the 5th Street Railroad tracks.
Oh.
Like, he's like, I always feel bad for people in the back, and there's nothing you can do about it.
No, that was probably the least of my worries at that time.
That's true. Fair statement.
But no, so then I'm in the ER and hooked up to morphine, and after that, for most of the story, I'm on morphine. So anything I did or said is not my fault.
He got me into some situations while on morphine, for sure.
Is he telling, like, all the dirty little secrets?
No, like he'd have me do things. Like, I know that, no, that sounded awful.
Oh yeah.
He did.
There was no privacy in ICU, just for the record. He wasn't having me do those kinds of things. No, it was like the shooting was on a Tuesday. And then on Thursday was the big Summer Nights music thing gathering downtown. And he wanted me to go thank the community. The kids. Okay, so remember we were talking about all the kids in school?
Yeah.
Well, all these little kids were coming to the hospital, just big crocodile tears, like, is Officer Doyle, like, parents, nobody knows what to do. They just want eyes on. And so this guy wouldn't freaking turn anybody away. And it was, okay, there are like person limits on this floor, all out the window. The hospital's just like, whatever, anything goes. And so there were people everywhere all the time. And he wouldn't turn anybody away, and he couldn't talk. So here he is with his whiteboard trying to cheer up the kids and doing all this stuff. So, but yeah, he asks me to go do this, and I'm like, I can't tell him no. My husband's just survived a bullet to the head, so I'm like, fuck, I'm going to go do it.
That card didn't play very long, by the way.
Yeah. Well, when I was... Well,
I would use that card forever.
Well, I'll tell you the moment he lost that card. That's a fun story, too, for him. So I get on stage in front of like 10,000 people, and he said he's seen a video. I just remember crying, and I said something, and he's told me like to the effect, it's really like we see all these kids struggling in our community and we know it, but do we ever take the time like he does to step in and try to mentor or be a positive influence in that kid's life? And with Daniel's life trajectory, like he has quite a story.
Yeah.
And so then the question is, did he have someone who could be his steady person or positive influence? I don't know the answer to that, but maybe if he had, he wouldn't have made the decision he made.
Right.
So this was I share that part. I've shared that story quite a few times. And so here's a situation where what she's just been through and what she is like, this is 2 days old, and what she's going through, and she didn't stand up there. She wasn't angry. She didn't play the victim. That was her message. This was a perfect. I mean, she could have played this so many ways, and nowadays that's what everyone wants to do, is they want to play the victim and be angry at somebody. And we were never angry at Daniel Tiger.
We never hated him.
Like, I don't know what, it wouldn't have served any purpose. It wouldn't have helped us.
I do remember, though, Sue Fox, like when she was escorting me to my car that first night, and Daniel's family was there, because Daniel did not survive, by the way. Neither did any of the other officers. So this guy in the studio with us is the only one who did. I do remember her putting her body in between me and that family, probably just not knowing, right? Like how I would respond or something. And I mean, I'm not going to go attack the guy's family or anything. I mean, it's, is what it is.
It's interesting. So, sidebar, when I was a reporter, one of the stories, it was a series piece I did called, I think it was called like, Where Are They Now? And so I took like 3 people. One was kind of a fun one, lighthearted, story, but one of them was a woman whose husband was a highway patrol trooper back in, I think this happened in the 80s. I think it was in the 80s. And he was on patrol. He had arrested somebody for drunk driving. The person, it was actually, I think, 2 people. And the person, one of the 2, this is going back ways, so I don't remember all the details, but basically it was a little bit of a similar situation where one of the 2 people in the car, and I don't even know that he was the driver, that he had been in trouble before. And he had told somebody, she learned later, so the widow of this trooper learned later, that he had told somebody that like jail was so bad or prison was so bad that he was not going to go back again.
Yeah.
And he actually, this was before they had the bars between the back seat and the front seat of patrol cars. In fact, this probably prompted it to be pushed in South Dakota. But he stabbed the trooper from the back seat in the neck. And the man actually drove himself to the Spearfish Hospital and then died at the hospital. But he had a wife and a young child at the time. And she too said, I've never even been mad at him. Like, she's like, I actually felt pretty sorry for him he felt so desperate that's what he had to do, that he'd had that experience that made him so desperate not to have it again, that he would kill somebody to not go to prison. And of course he
cop, like in this case. Yeah.
And he did end up, this gentleman did end up, he fled from the car, but they did end up finding him, and he did go to prison. I'm not sure. I think he might have passed away in prison not too long ago, but it was an interesting because Charity told me this part of the story before, that, we were never really mad. And it immediately made me think of this widow who said, I was never really mad at him. I never hated him. It just, I really just felt badly for him, which I think
there's not any, in my opinion, like any right or wrong way to grieve, because it's not conscious. It's like, I'm going to grieve this way. And some people, anger, it's a very natural thing to go through. I'm sure I had some pretty strong emotions that first day.
Sure.
But thinking these things through and processing, and having to call my daughter who was away at camp and telling her what had happened, and just all those kinds of things, I had to be rational, and, I'd go home every day, I would shower, and then other than that, I'd be at the hospital. And, someone asked me, like, why are you even bothering with, fixing yourself up. I'm like, I need to give him some incentive. Like, who knows what's going to happen, right? I don't want to be like looking like I feel
Sure.
and just have him go, oh God, what's the point here? But yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I know exactly where I was when you were shot. To add a little lightness to the topic, I had a almost 4-month-old baby at the time, and so I was in. We had an old school news studio, right? So not the way we do things now, where you have like a wellness room when you're nursing your child. So I was in a conference room with the door locked, pumping breast milk.
Oh.
But I could hear the intercom calling everybody to the, like, we need reporters now. And so I eventually finished what I was doing. I knew something serious had happened and got into the newsroom. And of course, it was fairly chaotic. I still remember my co-anchor telling me later. So he went to the scene and he said, when a like a Game Fish and Parks vehicle jumped the curb to get to the scene, I knew it was bad. Like, just things that, I mean, we go to a lot of crime scenes, and none of them were like this, right? And so he shared that later, but they had heard, the people in the newsroom, because it was shortly after 4:00, and that's when you're in the newsroom. We had, I think we probably had a 6:00 news at the time, maybe a 5:30, but I think we'd moved it to 6 at that point, and a lot of people in the newsroom, and they're working on their stories and they're editing video, and you just hear this chaos come over the police scanner, and everybody hears it. And I remember that between shows, so we had a 6:00 show and 9:00 show, and I remember, poor guy, I still kind of remember the look on his face. Our weekend meteorologist, so in very small markets, the weekend weather person reports news during the week. So they do 2 days of what they really want to do, which is be a meteorologist on the news, and they do 3 days of, unfortunately, news reporting. And so he's there just as a reporter at this point, and I just, like, the look on his face talking about hearing the scanner traffic. Like, I think everybody's like, I don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight. And I was so grateful that I didn't hear it. I was like, oh, what a blessing to have this 4-month-old baby to go home to and not have heard what they all heard today.
Well, I think it was the call that when he got on the radio and how he sounded. And I don't know, to this day, I have never listened to this audio, to the 911 call or the radio chatter.
Sure.
I think he thinks I won't be able to handle it, and I probably won't be able to handle it. So when we do trainings on this, I go out of the room, and he plays it for the new recruits and then flags me when it's time to come back in. But, yeah, there were a lot of people who said, I know exactly where I was because I heard that.
Right.
Whatever sound he was making, and they just flew. I think at least one, if not more, patrol cars got wrapped around trees or something.
Just one.
Just one? Okay. Because they were going so hot, and it was just like, what is going on, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, and strangely enough, too, so my husband is a firefighter, EMT. It was his shift day, and he happened to have the day off.
Wow.
So our family was completely insulated from the trauma that so many people, like you mentioned at the start of this podcast, so many people experienced in our community, experienced some level of trauma. And it was broad daylight on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon in August, and it was just so shocking, I think, for so many people.
And it's not just first responders. I mean, I know of community members who stopped
to try and help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That are completely ruined. Their lives. Yeah.
Sure.
It wrecked them. It wrecked them.
You talked about the chaos where you were. Hospital was also chaos. I mean, not so much.
I probably came close to getting arrested that day too.
Yeah, not so much for me, but what she dealt with showing up and not knowing what was going on. And
well, I walk in, right? I've got my little boy in tow. I called my parents on the way. That was in the trying to rebuild the relationship phase. So thankfully they were in my life then. I don't know what I would have done otherwise. So we get to the emergency room. I've got Kim, the driver, my friend, and Alex, former teacher, and my son. And I go straight to the triage desk, and I just said, I'm Officer Doyle's wife, blah, 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 blah. And her face, like, she just looks at me, and I mean, it's that face like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
I can't tell her. I don't know that there were multiple
victims.
Like, I
Sure.
have no idea. All I know is my husband's been hurt, and I'm told to get here. And she's like, I'll be right with you. And I'm like, oh, God. So then, again, with the messages and all the stuff, I'm just like, this is not going to go great. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited. And now I'm getting huffy, and I'm getting pissy. And then pretty soon I think it was the newspaper was there in my space. And they knew more than I did. And I was mad. And so
They also got in some trouble for that.
They
in
did.
more ways than one.
But so hospital administration came and removed them. And then by then my parents were coming. And so my son got to experience this. They take my kid. And then someone pulls me back into a different waiting area, like inside the ER. So I get in there, and I walk into a room, and there's a man and a woman. And the woman comes straight up to me, like, I was already overwhelmed. I don't know what's going on. And her first question to me was, who are you? And I'm like, what a weird question. And I don't know what to say. And I got defensive because I'm freaking out. And nothing, it wasn't anything she did, but I said, well, who are you? Mm-hmm. And she said, well, I'm so-and-so, and it happened to be one of the officers' mothers. So those were her parents. And I'm like, and I knew their son, and I said, oh, my God. Like, there's more than one? And so now I'm picturing like a strategic ambush, like the freeway shooters or something, and I'm like, what the hell has happened? They don't know anything other than their son's here, and now they know that there's 2 victims as well. And no one will tell us anything. So we waited and waited. And then I see a retired police officer who was working security at the hospital, and I grabbed him, and I just said, please get me somebody who knows what the fuck is going on, because I'm ready to go storm the halls. Where is my husband?
What has happened?
Yeah. And so somebody gets me finally, and I'm figuring I'm going to get the news. And that's why it's taking so long, because who wants to be the one to deliver that kind of news, right?
No.
So she comes and gets me, and she's like, okay, I'll take you to your husband. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe there's hope. Or is this you can go hang out with his body for a little bit, right? So we walk back into the bay. She parts the curtain, and he's sitting up. I mean, like, the bed is elevated, and he's sitting up. He's stoned on morphine. He has a hole in his head that was really weird, and it was, hindsight, much cleaner. And I'm sure they cleaned you up a little bit by then, or
No idea.
you have no idea.
Remember, I'm on morphine.
Okay. Well, it didn't look as graphic and gory as it does in the movies. And I'm like, okay, clearly he's been shot in the head. That's weird. And I don't know what to do. But so, like, he can't talk. And I'm looking at him, and I'm, he can't be him. He can't, like, try to make me laugh or do whatever. And he's probably trying to figure it, knowing him, even on morphine, trying to figure out a way to do that. So I don't know what to do. I'm just totally helpless. He can't talk, so I can't ask him questions. But I start picking gravel out of his knee. Remember when he said he went down to his knee, came up and shot? Yeah, so I was trying to clean him up or do something and be helpful. And then another officer walks in who he went to the academy with and says, well, I'm going to go say goodbye to Ryan. And I'm like, there's another one? Like, and then I'm pissed because I'm looking at him going, I don't know what he remembers or what he saw or what he experienced. Like, don't say this shit in front of my husband. So I'm like getting super protective. And then there was this awesome lieutenant that I did not personally like. He's a prick. I don't think anybody liked him. He walks in the room.
Do you still work with him, by the way?
No.
No,
Okay,
he's retired. He walks in the room, and Tim flips him off. And then I'm like, he's going to be okay. That was the message. Like, he's actually going to be okay. And then shortly after that, they wheeled him off to do like an angiogram and a trach, and because he was all swollen and trying to figure out, like, did the bullet hit his heart?
Sure.
Like, what's going on inside? Because it was so bizarre that they don't know yet what the bullet had done inside of him. They just know it didn't exit. So what are we dealing with? So
we still have bullet fragments all over?
Oh, yeah, everything's
They
in there.
left it all in there.
Interesting.
The only surgeries he had were the trach. Because of the burst salivary glands, his lungs were filling with fluid.
Oh.
All
How
kinds-
does that feel?
Oh,
Or do you remember?
You can't
he
feel
remembers that.
But what they do is that's what the trach is for. So they come in with a tube, and it was like every hour.
Like a vacuum tube.
Yeah. So they shove that down there, and it suctions and it's worse than it sounds.
And it sounds horrible.
Like every hour.
Yeah,
He
so-
can't sleep. They're coming in and suctioning him every hour. It was disgusting.
Which, I mean, it's better than drowning
It's
in
also better
saliva.
than dying, but it was still
Accurate.
horrible. It's horrible to
Accurate.
witness. He just looked miserable. Can't talk.
Ugh.
Wired shut. He had that surgery, so he's wired shut. Trying to piece his jaw back together.
So yeah, it was just chaos day to day. I mean, things did kind of settle down, but there was still a steady stream of people constantly coming in all week.
Well, if cops were not on duty, they were. Oh, that's the other thing you asked me to do, was to go talk to Nick, who was in a coma in the room next to you. And I'm like, and his mom would not leave his bedside. And that's what I'd have to do to get to Tim's room. Every day I'd go take a shower. I'd have to walk by that room, and to see a mom
Yeah.
by her child. Oh my God, that was the worst. That was the worst. I mean, I love you, but you're not my child. It is different with your. Couldn't do it. So so I did, and went and talked to Nick and relayed messages like, something to the effect of, nap time's over. Quit whatever. I don't know. I'm just like, oh my God, if he can hear, he's just like, probably flipping you off in his mind.
Well, yeah, so I can't. Everyone, people are coming in and they're wanting to talk, and so we're trying to, like, catharsis is sharing stories. That's kind of how we process things.
Oh my
So
God.
the only way I could share a story was to write it on the whiteboard. So it's probably a good thing that
But you would only have to write like one word, and someone else in the room would tell the story because they would know the story. And then there are things that I cannot unhear, which we are not going to share.
So here's an insight into my husband. He is a vault. He knows my sensitivity levels to many things. And so he doesn't share like hardly anything from his job. It would be like pulling teeth for him. If I knew something bothered him, like, well, in fact, there was a shooting completely unrelated couple years after that in town, and it got a lot of attention because it was during a big event. And I said to him when he got home the next morning, oh, there was a shooting at such and such last night. And he goes, yeah, I heard that. And I went to the gas station, and there was a picture of people wheeling it was not fatal, wheeling somebody out. And I was like, well, there he is, pushing the stretcher out of the event center.
That,
This just gives you some insight into him. He does not share hardly anything. But I was at a fire station one day, and if you remember Chris, I'll just leave it at that. But we were looking at pictures to share during our banquet. So some of them were kind of cool, like some fire pictures are obviously like they're dramatic and kind of cool. And, fortunately, no firefighters have been lost here in a long time. And so, but they were like, at one point it was like an accident. And he was like, oh, da-da-da-da-da. And I said, well, it wasn't fatal, was it? Because I don't want to, like, include that. And he was like, well, yeah, actually it was, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like his coworkers will tell me all sorts of stuff. But my husband tells me virtually nothing. And that's kind of the way I like it.
Well, we were kind of the opposite because, when I'm doing engineering, I'm not coming home at night and, like, telling about all the exciting shit I did during the day. now I start this job, and I would come home, and like she would want to hear, okay, what happened, you know. And there's in the beginning, you know, everything is new, and there's some of the stuff it's still exciting. So I would do that, and then it kind of shifted, and then she's on city council, and now we totally flipped. Now she didn't really swear that much before she was on city council. And now we flip roles.
I cuss like a
now,
sailor.
now at night she's telling me her stories and swearing, and now we're on the same cussing level at least. And
But the stories would go something like this, like, you know, well, I got spit on today, and I'd be like, I would have fucking punched somebody. And he's like, well, you can't do that. I'm like, okay, I can't be a cop then, because like for me, that's going to be a reaction.
Sure.
You know, like, yeah, I could not do that job.
It's ill-advised.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know my weak points.
she punches me a lot.
You
I will
asked
say,
for
I was
it.
just telling somebody this story this morning that, you know, when we've had sick kids at home and like they're fortunately, knock on wood, the stomach bug has not hit our home very many times, but Jeremy's perfectly willing to like clean up because he knows like I have a pretty strong gag reflex in those situations. And he's like, hey, at least I know, like it's my kid. You know, like I've cleaned up people before who like, I don't
You
know
don't
him from
know,
Adam, you know,
yeah.
and it's disgusting. So he's like, at least this is my kid, you know, and yeah, he
No,
comes
that
in
whole
handy
body
when it
fluids
comes
thing, like,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
can't do it.
So the hospital. So the next, you went quite a bit of time without knowing like
What
what
your-
my situation
Yeah,
was.
no,
Like,
3 days actually. So 3 days. He wasn't getting any rest. He was starting to look a lot horrible, just because he wasn't sleeping and going downhill. And so I'm thinking the worst, obviously, because you know I still have that
Voice.
whatever, yeah, that knowing in my mind. So I start standing guard outside the room because a cop would always be on duty, and they'd let pretty much anybody in. So they were
Super
failing.
helpful.
So I stood guard so he could get some rest, and then also threw a holy tantrum in the hallway until I got them to go get the effing doctor. So I knew what was going on with my husband. I'm like, this is day 3. Well, he's very busy. I understand he's busy. This is not an everyday thing. I can't just fucking Google this and know what to do. Like, what is going on? What's happening? Why are you not operating? Like, what is happening? So they finally got him over, and he was very patient and amazing with me. And took me through all the slides and showed me what was going on. And we were actually going to leave him. I'm like, well, that would have been good information to have. And I said, but, you know, he's going downhill and da-da-da-da-da. And so there were a series of conversations, and like, well, you know, this is just part of the deal. And I'm like, no, I know him. He needs a goal. Like, I've never seen him not hit a goal. So we're gonna get him a date. Like, you can be out of the hospital on this date or something. And the first thing he wanted to do was go to the Ryan's funeral, which was the first one. And so I went to the care team and I said, he is going to be at this funeral. And they said, absolutely not. And I said, you're not hearing me. He's going to be at this funeral. And they're like, okay, well, and they start talking, and well, he's got to be hooked up to this, got to be hooked up, and like, nope, he's going to walk into the funeral. Like, he's not going to be wheeled in and be the, like, take away from. Yeah. So they stopped arguing with me and finally said, okay, here's how we can do this, but he's got to go by ambulance and we have to stay with him. I said, fine. So that's what we did. And they were so accommodating.
That was Saturday.
Mm-hmm. So we did that, and he got a little wobbly. I mean, he's like, you know, a couple times we were kind of bubble wrapping him, you know, standing shoulder to shoulder, trying to keep him from falling down. But he had healthcare professionals with him the entire time he was out of the hospital. And then he got to go back in the ambulance, get hooked back up to everything. And then the following Tuesday, so literally a week, he was out because he was determined he was not gonna, like, I'm gonna go to Ryan's funeral. I'm just not gonna be here and, you know, deal with this. I want to get back to normal. So
I do remember that video.
Oh, God.
Because they did let us into the hospital. It was so good, though, because
That
so
was
many
overpowering.
people, I know. And I, like, now, if I put myself in that position, it would, I get it.
Well, you know how empathic I am.
Yeah.
So for me.
But like the hallways were lined with people. And we just,
God.
after like a really, because it was a rough time for the community, right? Very, very rough. And I just think it was like this little glimmer of like, you're just a little glimmer of hope. He sits here with like
I think
blushing with a little smile on his
Ryan's
face.
funeral. No, I mean Nick's funeral. We were in the ambulance too, but in the front, right?
That was after I got out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So driving and just for both funerals, like people and cars, law enforcement from all over the country. People lined up for miles.
Yep.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Overpowering, but it sucks being an empath sometimes. Because I'm feeling everybody's stuff and my own. So it's like, so talk about curling up into a corner.
Yeah.
So now I'm home. So then the next goal was getting back to work. So my first day at Central High School was supposed to be, I think the Tuesday, 3 weeks after the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal was to be there for that first day at Central. So that was my first day back at work.
Well, here's a fun thing you can talk about on this is the way you had to eat.
Oh, yeah. So my jaw's wired shut, which is a great way to lose weight, by the way. So I'm starting out, it's a lot of smoothies and protein shakes and stuff. And, we got, I don't know how many McDonald's gift cards. So
Yeah.
I don't know how many times a day we went through the McDonald's drive-thru and got a shake because that's really all I could do.
And there's like zero guilt, right? 'Cause
Oh, no.
It's like,
Yeah,
this is the only
you need-
calories I can get. Like,
And then they even figured out, and my teeth were like really tight. So it was tough to get even
To strain things through his teeth.
right.
oh.
Can you imagine?
No.
And they eventually figured this out at McDonald's, so they would actually water the
Yeah.
shakes down even a little bit more.
And Stonewalls, do you remember that restaurant?
Yeah.
They would make a soup. There was a soup that you could have, and they'd blend it all up so you could suck it through your teeth.
So two things about the food. You can only do protein shakes for like a couple of days, and then you're tired of it. So then you start to experiment. So actually, one of the best things was like scrambled eggs and cheese and milk in a blender.
Oh.
And it sounds gross,
It does.
but after doing nothing but protein shakes, it was like the best thing in the world.
Your standards are lowered.
It's right. It's all your level of desperation that you're at.
I believe you because when I was in high school, there was a kid who was a really good football player, really good athlete in general, and he broke his jaw playing football. And I remember, I think it was his mom told somebody at that point, like, blend a turkey dinner. Like,
Yeah.
he did not care. He blended everything. And
blended
he was
everything.
perfectly content. He did not care. He didn't care. Like things that sounded completely disgusting, blend it up. He'd suck it through the straw. And because same thing, I mean, that was like a 16-year-old, probably a 15-year-old that you're burning calories like crazy anyway. Yeah.
Well, then, what do people do? Like, you're going through something. What do people do? What do they bring you?
Food.
They bring you food.
Crazy amounts of food.
So people would come to the door and ring the doorbell, and I would answer the door, and they'd have this big thing of food, and then they would realize, oh, shit, he can't even eat this. I'm like, it's fine. Family still has to eat.
Yeah.
So the really good stuff went in the freezer until I could
Yeah,
tell
we saved it for
the
him.
stuff.
Aw.
So going back to the first day of work, just had to convince the chief to let me go back.
Sign off.
And
He was very Papa Bear.
he said as long as the department shrink signs off on it, you're good to go. So I fooled him and got the okay to go back. Now, this is at the school in light gear, so no way was I ready to go back to the street. But
Right.
for that assignment, I was good to go. So that's what I did.
Yeah, so he got signed off on pretty quick. I, on the other hand.
Well, let's pause here and we'll come back and we'll talk about some of because our headsets, we need a break from the headset.
They hurt.
We'll be right back on the Escape Pod. At One Heart, transforming lives begins with safe, stable housing and a support system that allows people to reach their true potential. It requires motivation, mentorship, and a myriad of services. It takes time and treasure, but it's worth it because it's working. One Heart provides people with a sense of security, opportunities for economic advancement, and adds dozens to the workforce each year. Learn more about why One Heart works at oneheartrc.org. Welcome back to the Escape Pod. We are coming to you from Rapid City, South Dakota. We have escaped to our little escape pod here at the main provider building
the padded
on the
cell.
One Heart campus. It could double as a padded room.
Yeah.
We haven't used it for that purpose yet, but there's plenty of time.
I'm not going to say that statement pertains to me. There's a reason there's a chair in the corner over there.
We are happy to have our guest, Tim, Charity's husband, in the room, in the pod, to hang out with us today and shared a tough story. Although he tells it as you've told it many times.
Many times.
You've probably lost count. So I mentioned one of my coworkers was, at the scene, and I asked him. I messaged him earlier today and said, "What do you remember about that day?"
Oh, is this Justin?
Yes, Justin. So he just wrote back actually and said, "The look on everyone's face. An officer told me it isn't good, and the speed of the ambulance leaving the scene." So again, when you've covered plenty of crime cases and you remember how fast an ambulance can drive away from something, that really does kind of say a lot. So you've managed to, it seems like, escape from any super long-term, physically, pretty good.
Yeah.
Mentally.
So I mean, physically, like the left side of my jaw, there's still some numbness there.
Really?
I don't even notice it. I had a ringing in my ear, which diminished. I don't even. It's still there, but I don't even hear it anymore. You just kind of adjust to it. The only really lasting thing is my jaw, which it just kind of feels like if I touch it, it kind of feels like it's half numb from like Novocaine or something like that.
That would drive me crazy.
And then I can't taste anything on the left side of my tongue.
Oh, that also would drive me crazy.
So if I like what I'm eating, I chew on the right side. If I don't, I chew on the left.
What does Charity make that you chew on the left side?
Nothing.
Okay.
I don't make anything, or I don't make anything you want to chew on the left side?
Yes.
Okay.
Mentally.
Okay, so when he
Mentally
said
and
he gets
emotionally.
punched a lot, it's not because I'm an abusive spouse. It's because it's not fighting punching. He's a shithead punching.
I know I'm going to get punched before I say it, and I do it anyway because it's worth it.
Well, okay, so one of the most colossal punches, because, we were talking about, like, why I can't be a cop. Someone swings it. I mean, I just have that response because of the way I grew up, right?
Sure.
Fighting. So it's hard.
Fight, flight, freeze.
Mostly fight.
Emphasis on fight.
Yeah. Capital FIGHT. And then, yeah. But so when we get home, he's got this tracheoscopy hole that has to be cleaned. Yeah, you would have. Yeah, it was a lot of that. But I did my duty, helped him out, cleaning it up. And one day, he thought it would be fun to plug his nose and blow through the freaking hole. And so this thing opens up.
No!
Julie, it was disgusting. I always say it looks like an eye socket with no eyeball.
I say it looks like a butthole.
And I'm right there. And he does this. And it was so disgusting. So, yeah, he got punched.
Thinking back, if I could have done that and made a sound come out of it, that would have been even better.
Was that when he quit being able to use the, I got shot card?
Uh-huh. That was when.
That was it.
That was it.
I mean, that's fair right
So
there.
I blew that one early on.
You could have milked it a tad bit longer.
No.
So mentally, no. Like, I got, well, when we when we do this, we get asked a lot of questions, and the first question goes back to even when I was in the hospital, because she asked me this. And what did you ask me? If I'm done.
Oh, yeah. Doyle, you done being a cop?
What'd I say?
You didn't say anything because your jaw's wired shut.
But I think you told me.
He mumbled, like he just right away. And he's on morphine, but there was no delay in response. He just shakes his head no. Mm-mm, mm-mm. I'm like, fuck.
And that was a question I get asked, like, did you ever have the thought, like, no, I'm done doing this? And
Not for a moment.
I really didn't. That thought never really entered my head. It was, all right, what do I need to do to get back to the job? And so I really didn't go through any PTSD. I really didn't have nightmares. You know, not that there isn't times where I was affected by it, but it wasn't anything that I couldn't deal with.
Why do you think that is? Because I will tell you, my husband has shared some things from some tough calls, which he, again, doesn't do much. And so there was one case where actually another fireman's wife said, was talking about a former firefighter and medic. He hasn't been in our city for many years now, but she said, you know, if people had known he had these, you know, terrible dreams about one of these calls, they might have been able to help him. But they didn't realize that it was many years ago, so it was kind of before, like, I think it was before people recognized the importance of, like, hitting things head on sometimes, you know, and being proactive with people on tough calls. And my husband said, well, you know, what's interesting is I was on that same call too. And he's like, now I wasn't the first one there, and I think they were. And so their experience was somewhat different, but it was a fatal fire involving a child. And we know of other cases where he's been the same person on the same scene. And I like to say, I think he's just very good at compartmentalizing. I think he kind of leaves it. It's at work. And once in a blue moon, like I said, I can kind of tell, like, did something happen? Or, you know, he'll maybe give a little inkling that, like, it was a tougher call than usual. But I kind of just chalk it up to something very simple, which is he's not an overly emotional person. And I think that makes him really good at the job he's in. You know, that helps because he does have this ability to kind of set it aside.
My theory always was, because I would have people ask me, like, did you go through, like, have you had PT? Like, I'm going through this still. Like, have you had any breakdowns or PTSD or whatever? And I'm like, no. And eventually I started, like, wondering, like, what's wrong with me? I, like, almost like I need to have a breakdown or something like that. And I think my theory was always, you know, I came into this job at 35. I have some life experience. I came into it with, I think, a reasonable expectation of what it was going to be. Not that there wasn't certain surprises.
It wasn't like glamorous and da-da-da. Right. It was like very realistic.
Realistic, sure.
I mean, I knew I carry a gun. I might have to shoot somebody. Somebody might try to kill me because I'm a cop. So I think I had truly accepted that. Yeah. And because of that, now that this happened, I didn't have to deal with the emotional part of it. Now I just need to physically get back to where I was so that I can do the job. And actually my theory was kind of confirmed in a recent conversation I had with a psychologist. And we were talking about something else. We were talking about, like, peer support, and I have some
resilience. Yeah,
some ideas about things I want to do in the police department to expand and make our peer support team better.
And did he know your story?
Yeah.
Okay.
She did.
Oh, sorry.
She did. And
look at me. That was terrible. Sorry.
And she actually she knew the story, and she wanted to ask me some questions about it. Sure. So we talked about it, and she asked me some questions about my upbringing and my background and, like, my physical health and everything, like, before it happened. And she kind of confirmed what I was thinking. Like, if you have unresolved trauma in your past and you go through something like this, it's going to affect you a lot more than if you're really well.
Oh, there we go. There's my answer. I never heard.
And I think that it kind of makes sense. And again, also you know, if you're going to go into a job like this, you have to be really honest with yourself about that something like this could happen. And I think with some people, they may on the surface accept that, but then when something really happens, that's when you find out how deep that level of honesty was within themselves on how they react to it.
Sure.
And then another thing is you never know how people are going to deal with stuff just until you go through it. So, and I tell people when I'm talking about like officers and mental health, most people would assume that because I went through this, like this was the most traumatic thing that's happened to me in my career, or this is the thing that would affect me the most. And it really isn't. So what I tell people is like the daily things that we experience, and stuff like seeing the same domestic violence victim go through this over and over, and that feeling of not being able to help them, and see some of the situations that these young kids are in, in our community, and what they go through on a daily basis, and those kind of day-to-day stressors of that job is that's affected me far more than being shot did. And it kind of surprises people, but they just, just to see what we see and deal with on a daily basis what we do, it's tough.
Well, one of our former chiefs always says, people don't call the police just to say, "Oh my God, have you seen the sun today?" Like it's always
their worst day.
Something
in some cases.
awful going on, right? Yeah. It's a crime. It's an accident. It's somebody's afraid. It's never usually on good circumstances.
Right.
Under good circumstances. So
for sure,
horrid.
That's interesting what the psychologist shared and kind of her take on it, and that's I'm going to sit on that one for a while. That's
I, on the other hand, did not really. So I had this kind of theory in my younger years of there just seemed to be like these medical things that would be fads, and then everybody has it. Like this thing would hit, like, what is, I can't even think, carpal tunnel, or what is fibromyalgia, or what, and then pretty soon everybody has it, right? I know how that works now.
Like when you give something a name and now,
Yeah,
sure.
So that's what it is. You give it a name and it's like, oh, that's what it is. But PTSD was one of those things where we didn't really recognize it years ago. And it was just like, just suck it up. And I think I've shared that with you with like the things I've experienced. It wasn't until I was an adult, even though I knew there were some things that were wrong and I, tried to stand my ground and I recognized some patterns that were unhealthy and the risky behaviors and all that stuff. It wasn't until that conversation with Marcos when I went, oh, okay, that's not okay. This is not okay. That I realized that. But for me, it was PTSD. I just didn't buy into it. I'm like, well, okay. I now know better. So I went through it in a very weird way. And it was literally like my brain split in two, right brain, left brain. So my logical, rational brain would see him, okay, he's home, he's there, and everything's okay. But then my right, irrational, emotional brain would send me into fits. So I would be out of the house trying to resume my duties and try to establish normalcy again, reestablish normalcy. And I have to talk to him because he's not there. He's not really there. I have to call him. I literally would pull over on the side of the road and dial him. And of course, he's not answering because he can't frickin' talk. But my irrational brain is not making that connection. It's like, oh, God, it went to voicemail because there's no one there to answer it. And this would go on and on. So 30 days I went through hell trying to find proof that he was alive. And so I'd go home and I'd poke him and he'd be like, what are you doing? Like, I'm trying to see if you're alive. Well, like, but that's what you'd say if I were making you up. And he's like, oh, shit. That's what, if I'm making you up, you're going to say whatever my brain.
Do you remember her doing this? Yeah.
In hindsight now, I should have changed my voicemail message to, yes, I'm alive, leave me alone.
You couldn't talk, though.
Yeah, right.
So that would have been.
I could kind of talk. You just imitated me. I could kind of talk.
But no, this went on. And so I'm like, okay, if there's a death certificate, where would I have hidden it? So I'm like, I'm looking like I did a number on myself, and it was completely irrational, and it was almost like living two lives at once simultaneously, and trying to keep this part down and trying to be normal and not let the kids know that I'm freaking out and ready to fall apart and all this stuff. So I'd made an appointment with the department shrink as well, and then the police chief and I would get together every so often, couple of weeks, 3 weeks, to this little restaurant that he liked, and is in a basement of a building, just a dark little hole. His favorite. I can still tell you exactly what he would order every single time. But yeah, I've got a list on this guy. But and we would just process. This was also an incredibly hard thing for a police chief to go through. His watch, his department, similar to me, like how if anything goes wrong at work, what did I do? How did I cause that? That I think he went through a lot of that too. And we'd sometimes just sit in the restaurant and cry and have our lunch and commiserate and whatever. Or he'd insulate me from things that he wants to kind of tell me, but he's going to do it in a really fatherly sort of a way. And then he mentions one day like a payout from the state to the families of the 2 law enforcement officers that passed away. And I got really excited. And he goes, no, you're not going to get one. And I'm like, that's not why I'm excited. I didn't get a check. And he's like, what are you talking about? And so I explained to him what's been happening. And he's like, he's very much alive, Charity. Yeah. No, you didn't get a check. And I just started bawling. And I'm like, oh, my God. Okay, that's the proof I needed. And my brain just kind of knitted itself back together. And it stopped. So by the time I did go to the
He's
shrink.
still here, I can attest.
Yeah.
He's real.
Yeah.
And I was just happy that she would rather have me than the check.
I mean, yeah, we were struggling, but I still wanted
That's the silver lining here, right?
I still preferred you over the money. So, no, but it messed with me. But yeah, by the time I went to the shrink, he's just like, hey, you're fine.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't know if he was given it as all, but...
So how do you, because you obviously have had, you struggled a little bit more mentally and emotionally. It sounds like, at least me. I am not a professional, although I do like to diagnose people.
I feel like
time.
I kind of took it for the team.
Yeah.
Like, I went through all this stuff. I mean, both kids went through, of course, their own journeys.
Sure.
But nothing super residual like it was with me. Even our son, after everybody was home, he was having nightmares. And I'll say this to the recruits, like, what do you think the nightmares were about? Well, fear
My
of
dad
losing.
being shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope. This is another thing that gave me PTSD, I swear. So I go in one night to console him, and I said, it's understandable that you're having nightmares. Like, this is normal. We just went through something traumatic. You're afraid of losing your dad. He goes, no, Mom. You forgot me. And I'm like, what?
In the nightmare, you forgot
the recurring nightmare.
your
Yes.
child.
I ignored and forgot my child.
Because you were so focused
I
on
was so
Tim.
focused on Tim. So I'm just like, well, you had it, Grandma and Grandpa and Gracie and your sister, and you couldn't all be at the hospital. And he's like, no, I understand. But I'm just like, worst mother of the fucking year. God, I felt so horrible.
So this is why I brought her into telling the story with me. Not only because there's interesting stuff here, obviously, with everything that happened that day, but we can't forget as law enforcement, and I think people understand this maybe a little better with military families when they're deployed and the family is alone. I mean, it's the same for first responders. Like, they walk out the door, and as a first responder, I have some control over what happens to me that day. The family has nothing. They watch you go out, and they just hope you come back the next day. So not forgetting the families when it comes to, the peer support and taking care of officers, and also extending that to the family to make sure that they're taken care of. And, I think as a department, we learned a lot from that shooting on, if something like that were to happen again, there's a lot of things that we would handle differently. And I'm sure the hospital could say the same thing. And everybody, like, this was a shock to everybody. Nobody was prepared for this.
Right.
But I think
I think we all learned a lot from it. Even like there was a police wives club back then. Doesn't exist any longer, but oh my God. I mean, shout out Kari Doyle and Janet Hedrick, because those two, there was just so many people trying to contact us, so many concerned, rightfully, hey, information, what can you update us on things? And I mean, I'm already overwhelmed, and they recognized that. So they got together and they said, look, we're going to assign one wife to each family, and that'll be like the gatekeeper. It was brilliant, and it helped so much. Fundraising, like the things that they did to support the families, and because the community wanted to help, and so they figured out a way to funnel that to be efficient, and actually, they were just incredible with everything. I can't give them enough props.
Well, my husband was already a firefighter when we met, so that's a little bit different than you guys. So I knew, I mean, I can't pretend like I didn't know what I was getting into. I knew what I was getting into, but there is a real reality check. And I've told my own family this, and actually when I talk about it sometimes, I remember shortly after we got married, and Jeremy came with this like form and said, if something happens to me, who do you want to come tell you? And I had to like list from the department so that I would, And I don't know if they still do it.
Do that.
And I don't know if they still do it. And I don't know, and unfortunately, 2 of the 3 people I listed are retired, and one of those retirees has since passed on.
Away,
but there is still one. But, it's like, that's a harsh reality right there, right?
How do you even pick somebody to do that?
And not necessarily a death, but if I get hurt, who do you want? But then I always, there's that moment where like, well, if I see them pull up, am I gonna just assume, like you kind of had this sense that something was wrong that day.
Like if he burns his hand sliding down the fire pole.
Yeah. Well, and then the reality too is like, even, the shooting, like you said, that's a pretty rare thing. And same thing, I mean, I worry about things like they don't have a weapon to defend themselves, right? So if they go into a scary situation.
Well, they send these guys in first. So.
They often do. And that does, make me feel better. But it's one of those things where you're like, even Jeremy has said, like, sometimes, you're in a situation where it's like, well, if the guy I'm working on is faking it or something, and sometimes he's even said, I'm kind of surprised. I'm kind of surprised we haven't had something unusual like that happen. But, in their cases with firefighters, it's actually like it's cancers and things of that nature, the heart disease that comes up 2 years into retirement because you're around chemicals so much, because those are the things that in reality are what get you more than, the dangers of a fire or anything else. But it still is like in that moment when you have to say, if something happens, who do you want to come tell you? And that's
I mean, for cops, it's more suicide. Not only on the job, but in retirement. And even that incident, this shooting we're talking about, there were multiple people from the fire department that
they had a hard time.
It wrecked their careers. I mean, it was too much.
Yeah, it was a lot. So how, Charity, because we talked in the beginning about having a little bit of a conversation about like healthy coping. So since then, what you said you didn't really believe in PTSD till you were very clearly experiencing it yourself. And so what are some ways that you escaped those emotions in a good way that you were able to move on? And I mean, he's still a police officer. He still goes to work, most days of the week. And what do you do in a good way to deal with it?
In a good way, I think that physical health, that mental health, like taking care of yourself, your vessel, your mind is always good. Getting back to normal and gratitude, like being grateful for, the things. I mean, we ended up coaching a soccer team together like weeks after this, which we were signed up and there was no one else. So it's like, okay,
we're doing it.
We're doing this. We weren't back to normal. We probably needed some time, but it was in the long run probably good medicine for the most part.
Probably helps. Does it help having kids that like your kids very much still, they weren't babies, but they were young. They still needed to be cared for.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and watching, like I do remember because of the day wondering if there would be a stigma with my son and the cello because of what happened. And nope, he picked up that cello. And I mean, the kid is just amazing. Kid. He's 22 now.
Another part of this was, I never had to go see a counselor, but it's not like I wasn't talking about this. And, we did interviews, and I don't know how many times I did talk to reporters and radio and everything. And then I started training on it. So I was constantly talking through it. So I kind of went through my processing publicly because this was such a big thing for the whole city. So I think for me, that was part of my therapy, was just being out talking about it. And it was hard at first, and then it got easier. And then it was a few years before I got a hold of the dispatch audio. Like I never really had the desire to listen to it, but one of the groups I was training asked for it. And I was like, all right, I guess I could look into it. So the captain got a hold of the dispatch and put it on a drive, and we sat in his office and listened to it. And the first time it was really hard, and I was like, yeah, okay, I can do this. And I
Is it what you remembered it being? Like when you heard it, did it?
Yeah, I mean, except for what I sounded like, I had no idea.
You had no idea,
no
right?
Idea. And I don't play the whole thing. I cut out most of the stuff that involves other officers, and it's mostly just me and the communication with dispatch, and then you can hear some things happen. So I don't play the whole thing, but I probably listened to that probably 5, 6, 7 times before I stopped getting a reaction to it. So then the last part of the recovery was, I'm back at work at the school. So the next summer comes up, and it's like, okay, what am I going to do this next summer? Am I going back to CID? Am I going to be? Am I going back to the street? And I was kind of lobbying to go back to the street, and Chief overruled me on that one. The kids said they were okay with it. In hindsight, I don't think they probably were. They were just saying that. So that was the right move. So then the next summer comes up, and I was really like, put me back on the street. Let me do this. So because that was the last piece of, am I okay? Am I ready? Can I just go back to work on the street and not have it affect me? And Charity was involved in that decision too.
Yeah, I get called into the chief's office, and I'm like, oh, what did I? It's like going to the principal's office, right? No, we had a great relationship, but he said, so, your husband put in to go back on the streets this summer. And I said, yep. And he goes, I need to know if that's going to cause a problem at home. And I said, I appreciate that, but I think if you don't let him do it, it's going to cause a problem here. And he said, okay. I said, so this is what he signed up to do, Chief. You need to let him do it. And he goes, well, all right, but I might have to ride along with him the first 2 weeks. I said, you do what you got to do.
Which, thank God.
Did you have a buddy?
Thank God that didn't happen. Like, that's a really...
I think it would have been fun. I think he's fun.
Yeah, but having the chief...
He's still your boss.
Yeah, having the chief ride along with you, that's a real stress reducer.
Yeah.
So, nope, I got the okay, and so actually, the assignment I went back to that summer was the same street crimes unit. So, same uniform, like bike uniform, everything was kind of the same.
Oh, yeah, speaking of when he got his stuff back from evidence... Oh, my God. So I'm looking at his stuff because, I mean, they scan it for evidence, right?
I can't believe they gave it back to you.
And so they've got a lapel mic or a radio?
Shoulder mic.
Shoulder mic, whatever. Yeah, shoulder mic. And there was just like this brown stuff in it that was weird. And it did not put 2 and 2 together for the moment, but yeah, he bled all over it. So there's blood all over in the radio. And then I figured out, I'm like, oh my God, they didn't even clean it. What the hell is wrong with these people? They just gave it back. Here's your dried blood on your equipment. That was a beautiful move.
So yeah, that was. I showed up for work that day and hopped in the car, and I was by myself, and drove. And I assumed I was okay, but you don't know till you get out there. So I drove out of the Sallyport door, and it was fine. And the first call came in, and it was fine. And that's when I kind of knew that I was fine and I was back.
So
Awesome possum.
the end.
The end. Well, you've broken our record on length of podcast. So now you can add podcast to your, I've told this story many, many, many times, been interviewed, done trainings. Now you can add podcast to the list.
Cool.
So we're going to take one more very quick break. And then, Tim, I'll just give you a little heads up. We always talk about things we're escaping from, but there's also places we want to escape to.
Or things.
I always say it can be a mindset. It can be whatever. It can be a place. So we'll be right back, and we'll talk about, we'll wrap up the Escape Pod for this week. Need an early morning boost or midday pick-me-up? Check out the Homebrew Coffee Shop, a coffee shop with a cause in the heart of the One Heart campus. Homebrew is home to delicious coffee, sweet treats, breakfast, and lunch items, a great place to meet friends or host small group meetings. Homebrew, located at 201 Kansas City Street in Rapid City. Open Monday through Friday from 6:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. Homebrew, where you'll find hope for a home in every cup. All right, we're ready to wrap up another episode. Let me try that again. We're ready to wrap up another episode of the Escape Pod. I never thought about episode escape. That's a little, yeah, a little bit of that. Who wants to go first? Where do we want to escape to this week?
I don't have to work tomorrow.
Yay. Escaping to not work.
And then my gluten-free sugar cookie
is calling your name.
Mix. We're going to make cookies. My kid is home from college. My daughter, they'll come over. We're going to do the whole, get ready for Christmas thing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Tim, escaping to where?
The world famous Egg Fest.
Tell me more.
World famous. Ooh.
Or at least it will be after this.
Ooh, okay.
So this was a tradition that started years ago when I was at Central High School, and Dr. Justin Conroy.
Call out.
There's this theory that on the equinox it's supposed to be easier to balance an egg on its
equinox and solstice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we started doing this little thing where we'd bring in a box of eggs and we would have a competition around this small table in the freshman house of the Central High School on who could balance the egg quicker. So it started out with one egg and it progressed to
Yeah, you have to get two standing up.
two standing at the same time, and there's a trophy involved.
Oh, wow.
And probably at some times maybe some drinking to go along with it.
Never.
It's not at the school any longer.
Yeah,
just
it's not at the
For the
school.
record, yeah.
It progressed from there to a residence, and tonight it's going to be
a good time.
It's actually going to be at a bar.
So we're making it like an official event.
It's official.
Not
It's
just,
out. It's out
there.
in the
It's
open.
gonna be out. Anyone can film it on
Yep.
their smartphones, and it's going to be a thing. And then we have a party to go to after that too.
Rapid City, South Dakota, home of the soon-to-be famous Egg Fest.
Yes, and I have
Hey, yeah. Well, let's hashtag Justin Conroy, doctor, the doctor.
the doctor, and he, the rules have ebbed and flowed from certain, from here to there, but when he puts together an email inviting to this, it's
like a holy event.
It's about a PhD dissertation on the whole history of it and everything else. So it's kind of amusing. My name is on the trophy twice. I'm on a long dry spell though.
You
It's
are
been
on a long dry
years.
spell.
Okay.
I'm doing okay. I haven't taken last place yet.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm
Do you
on.
think that has to do with alcohol?
No, because everyone else is doing it too.
Oh,
Okay.
It's all about the spot at the table and getting the right egg.
Okay.
Well, you're the engineer. You should be able to hack that.
Okay, you can't just look at an egg and say, "Oh yeah, there you go." That's
You haven't practiced
and
that,
I'm a
I guess.
chemical engineer,
Okay.
not mechanical or civil, so it doesn't work that way.
All right, maybe you and I and Sierra should do this because then we've got a mechanical, a civil, and a chemical, and then we can see. Ooh, it's on. We're gonna do it. We can.
Oh my gosh, I can make fun of your family in so many.
And the musician. You know what? The musician will probably get it because he's
You
so
totally
good with his fingers.
would.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. All right.
Let's try it.
That sounds fun. Are you ready to take us out of here?
I am. Thank you for tuning in. We sincerely appreciate your support. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it as well. And just remember, we're a two-person show, Julie and I. We write, research, produce, and promote the show all by our little selves. Rating and reviewing and subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast really helps grassroots efforts like ours gain more exposure, more followers, more listeners. You can check out our website at escapepod.live, follow us on our socials, reach out at justbecause@escapepod.live, or share your story of escape with us to possibly be shared on a future episode at escapeartist@escapepod.live.
We're closing the hatch on this episode of the Escape Pod. Remember, trauma may be inevitable, but how you grapple with it is optional.
Stay resilient and keep laughing.